Picture this. Sirens are screaming, ER doors fly open, and a medical team is rushing in with a patient who is critically injured. To the outside eye, it looks like absolute chaos. But what if I told you that behind all that noise and urgency, there's a script? A highly rehearsed, step-by-step playbook that's designed to bring order to that chaos and save a life. Well, today, we're going to break down that exact playbook. So what even triggers a major trauma call? I mean, this isn't for just any old injury. You've got to be thinking about events with a huge, violent amount of energy transfer. We're talking high-speed car crashes, someone falling from a serious height, or a pedestrian getting hit by a car. In moments like these, the medics aren't just worried about the injuries they can see. They're immediately suspicious of the life-threatening damage that's hiding inside the body. And that's really what separates major trauma from, say, a really bad broken arm. It's the fact that there are multiple serious injuries, each one capable of killing the patient or costing them a limb right now. But this isn't just some gut feeling. To bring some cold hard math into a totally chaotic scene, doctors actually use a specific scoring system to figure out just how bad it is. And this right here, this is the magic number, 15. On a scale called the Injury Severity Score, or ISS, anything over 15 is the official trigger. The second a patient's injuries add up to more than 15, they are officially a major trauma. And that one little number kicks off this massive, coordinated, hospital-wide response. All right, so here's our game plan for breaking down this whole process. We've got a handle on what major trauma is. Now we're going to dive into the playbook itself, starting with the number one thing that kills people fastest: massive bleeding. Then we'll walk through the exact steps the team takes, getting air in and out, checking on blood and the brain, and finally, getting a look at the whole picture. So this universal playbook, it's called Advanced Trauma Life Support, or ATLS. The best way to think about it is like a global language for trauma. It means that whether you're in a high-tech trauma center in New York or a small rural hospital somewhere, the trauma team speaks ATLS. It's the system that gets everyone on the exact same page, working on the same priorities in the exact same order. And the heart of this whole system is the simple but really powerful acronym, ABCDE. Now, this isn't just some random to-do list. It is a strict, step-by-step process designed to do one thing and one thing only: find and fix whatever is going to kill the patient the fastest. First, you can't skip a letter. You can't jump ahead. You have to solve each problem before you're allowed to move on to the next. You know, for decades, the mantra in emergency medicine was just ABC: airway, breathing, circulation. But that changed, and there's a really good reason why. They added the C for catastrophic hemorrhage right at the front. Why? Well, because of brutal lessons learned on the battlefield and in emergency rooms. It turns out you can bleed to death from a big arterial wound in less than 3 minutes, way faster than you die from a blocked airway. So they had to rewrite the rules. It all comes down to this really simple, brutal piece of logic. You can't circulate blood you don't have. I mean, all the fancy airway skills and breathing machines in the world don't mean a thing if the patient's heart has no blood left to pump. So step one before anything else is to find that massive bleeding and stop it. Period. Okay, once any massive external bleeding is under control, the team's focus snaps right to the original A and B: airway and breathing. And really, it's a two-part question they're trying to answer. First, is there a clear path for air to get into the lungs? And second, are the lungs and chest actually working, or is something stopping them? When it comes to the airway, they always start with the basics. Simple moves like lifting the chin or thrusting the jaw forward can literally pull the tongue away from the back of the throat and open things right up. They'll suction out any blood or whatever else is in there. And all of this is done incredibly carefully because they have to assume there's a neck injury until they can prove there isn't. The golden rule is protect the spine. Okay, let's say the path is clear. The patient has an open airway. So everything's good with B for breathing, right? Well, not so fast. What's one of the most terrifying and immediate problems that can stop the lungs from actually working, even if the airway is wide open? The answer is this: attention pneumothorax. What happens is a hole in the lung acts like a one-way valve. So every time the patient breathes in, air gets sucked into the chest cavity, but it can't get out. This trapped air just builds up pressure, first collapsing the lung, and then, and this is the deadly part, it starts to squash the heart and the major blood vessels, making it impossible for blood to circulate. And here's the thing. This is a diagnosis made with hands and eyeballs, not with an x-ray. There is absolutely no time for that. The team is looking for a patient suddenly struggling to breathe, one side of their chest not moving like the other, and a blood pressure that's plummeting. That combination is a screaming red alert that they have to act on in seconds. And check this out. It's not just air that can fill up the chest. It can also be blood. If the team puts in a chest drain and gets an instant gush of 1.5 liters of blood, that's like an entire large bottle of soda. It's called a massive hemothorax. And for the patient, it's a one-way, non-stop ticket straight to the operating room. All right, with the immediate threats to airway and breathing dealt with, the hunt begins for the hidden killers. And that brings us to C for circulation, where they're looking for internal bleeding, and D for disability, which is all about checking on the brain. For this part of the job, they have two incredibly important tools. For C, circulation, they use something called a FAST scan. It's basically a quick ultrasound right there at the bedside that can spot hidden pools of blood in the belly or around the heart. And for D, disability, they use the Glasgow Coma Scale, or GCS. It's a simple, standardized way to score just how conscious the patient is. Now, the GCS score is way more than just a number. It's a huge decision-making tool. As you can see, a score of 13 to 15 is pretty good, a mild injury. But if that score drops to 8 or less, well, that's a total game changer. A score that low tells the team the patient has a severe brain injury and, crucially, that they can't protect their own airway anymore. A GCS of 8 is the trigger to immediately intubate the patient. If they do suspect a brain injury, a CT scan is next, and it reveals some really important details, like the type of bleed. An extradural hematoma often comes from a torn artery, so it's a high-pressure, fast-growing bleed that looks like a lens on the scan. A subdural, on the other hand, is usually from a slower, lower-pressure vein, so it tends to spread out along the curve of the brain. Both are incredibly dangerous, but that shape tells the surgeons exactly what they're up against. And this brings us to a golden rule, something that's drilled into every single doctor. It can be really tempting to assume a patient is confused or knocked out just because they smell like alcohol. But here's the thing. You can be drunk and have a deadly brain bleed at the same time. The rule is you always assume the worst until proven otherwise. Making that assumption can be a fatal mistake. So, after working their way through all the immediate threats from CLEEK, A, B, C, and D, we finally get to the last letter of this initial survey, E. And this is the part where the team takes a step back and looks at the whole patient, just to make sure they haven't missed anything. E stands for exposure and environment. This means they have to carefully remove all of the patient's clothing to do a full head-to-toe check for any hidden injuries. But at the exact same time, they're piling on warm blankets. Why? Because getting cold, hypothermia, is incredibly dangerous. It makes it harder for your blood to clot. It's one part of what doctors call the lethal triad of death, and preventing it can be as simple as starting with a warm blanket. Now, it's so important to realize that this entire ABCDE whirlwind we just walked through, that's only phase 1. It's called the primary survey. Its only job is to find and fix what's going to kill the patient in the next 5 minutes. It happens alongside resuscitation. It's only after the patient is stable that the team gets the chance to move on to a much more detailed examination and start planning for the final treatment, like surgery. So when you boil it all down, that's the real magic of the ABCDE system. It's not just a checklist. It's a shared language, a mental model that lets a whole team of different experts, surgeons, nurses, anesthesiologists, show up in a crazy, high-stress situation and instantly function as one single efficient unit. It is literally the tool they use to bring order to chaos. You know, this whole CABCD playbook is just a powerful example of how sometimes the best way to handle overwhelming complexity is with a simple, rigid script. And it kind of makes you think, where else in our lives do we rely on that same idea? From the pre-flight checklist a pilot runs through before takeoff, to the way a software team plans its work, our world is full of these simple processes that are all designed to do the same thing. Bring a little bit of order to the madness.